It didn't end with a bang, it ended with silence. On December 25, 1991, the red flag of the Soviet Union was lowered for the last time over the Kremlin. Just like that, the world's largest communist state ceased to exist. But how does a superpower, a nuclear-armed empire that once terrified the West, simply disappear? To understand the fall, we need to go back to the very roots of the Soviet system. After World War II, the USSR emerged as a global force. It controlled vast territories, extended its influence across Eastern Europe, and competed directly with the United States in the Cold War. For decades, the Soviet Union projected strength in space, in arms, in ideology. But behind that image, the cracks were already forming. By the 1970s and 80s, the Soviet economy was stagnating. It was built on centralized planning, where the government controlled every aspect of production. It worked during times of war and industrialization. But in a modern world, it couldn't keep up. While the West embraced innovation, technology, and consumer culture, the Soviet population faced shortages, long lines, and outdated goods. The state invested heavily in military power, but neglected the everyday needs of its people. Then came Afghanistan. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan to support a collapsing communist regime. What followed was a brutal, costly, and unwinnable war. It drained resources, cost thousands of lives, and became the USSR's Vietnam. It shattered confidence inside the Soviet leadership and among the people. By the mid-1980s, something had to change. That's when Mikhail Gorbachev became the General Secretary of the Communist Party. He was young, bold, and willing to reform. Gorbachev introduced two key policies: Perestroika and Glasnost. Perestroika meant restructuring the economy, allowing some market reforms. Glasnost meant openness, more freedom of speech, less censorship. But instead of saving the system, these reforms exposed its flaws. People started questioning the government openly. Newspapers began publishing stories of corruption, failure, and abuse. Ethnic tensions that had been buried for decades began to rise again across the 15 Soviet republics. The Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, demanded independence. In the Caucasus, in Ukraine, in Central Asia, the calls for autonomy grew louder, and in Moscow, Gorbachev found himself losing control. Then, in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Eastern Europe, once tightly held by Soviet influence, collapsed like dominoes. One by one, communist governments were overthrown, and the Iron Curtain was ripped open. By 1991, the Soviet Union was falling apart from within. In August of that year, hardline communists staged a coup. They placed Gorbachev under house arrest, hoping to reverse his reforms. But it backfired. The people rose up. Protesters flooded the streets of Moscow. Soldiers refused to fire. And a new figure emerged: Boris Yeltsin, president of the Russian Republic. Yeltsin stood on a tank, defied the coup leaders, and became a symbol of the new Russia. The coup collapsed in just 3 days, but so did the last grip of Soviet authority. One by one, the republics declared independence. Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan all left the Union. Even Russia itself began functioning as a separate state. And then, on December 25, 1991, Gorbachev resigned. He declared the office of the President of the Soviet Union no longer existed. That same night, the hammer and sickle flag was lowered from the Kremlin and replaced by the tricolor of the Russian Federation. After nearly 70 years, the Soviet Union was gone. What remained was chaos. The economy collapsed. Millions were thrown into poverty. Borders were redrawn. A world power was reduced to fragments. But what the fall of the USSR proved was something deeper. Even the mightiest empires cannot survive when the people lose faith. And sometimes, the end doesn't come through war or invasion. It comes from within.